Hi everyone, welcome to the Home Solar webinar. I'm Grace. I am the Community Outreach Intern for MadiSUN. I think we'll get started in a couple minutes, just as some stragglers hop in. But yeah. All right, hi everyone. We're going to be starting our MadiSUN Home Solar for Homes webinar. I'm Grace. I'm the Community Outreach Intern for the MadiSUN Solar Program. I just want to remind people that we have the Q&A function for questions that might pop up. We also have the chat, so if you're confused or want to ask a question on a certain slide, just let me know. We'll try to answer it in real time, but if we forget or if we kind of move on, we'll have some time at the end for questions. Yeah, so with that being said, I think I'll pass it over to my colleague, Sam.
Thanks, Grace, and thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. It's a beautiful evening, so I'm really excited to see so many people logging on to learn more about solar energy. Got some great co-hosts and panelists with me tonight. First, I want to introduce Mike Ludeting. He is from Green Penny Bank. He's going to be on with us a little later to be talking more about solar financing and some of the potential there. And I also am really excited to introduce my good friend and colleague, Stanley, from the Arch Solar team, and also his coworker, Samantha Hawk as well. They're going to be providing some additional technical help with us tonight, help on the technical Q&A side, I guess I would say. Stanley, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about Arch and what you all do over there?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I appreciate the intro. Yeah, my name's Stanley Minnick. I've lived in Madison about 14 years and been in the solar industry about 12 years. I work for Arch Solar, the band formerly known as Arch Electric. We've rebranded because solar is it's pretty much all we do. So little bit about Arch Solar. You've got good options through the group buy. We're one of them. And Arch Solar has been around since 2003. Our headquarters is up in Plymouth, Wisconsin. And then we've got an office and warehouse in Madison and an office in Milwaukee as well. We've been doing residential solar, commercial solar since 2003, like I mentioned. And we really focus on a consultative approach and just try to provide conservative estimates of savings and try to give people a really low pressure approach to going solar. And I would just say a couple of really small things relevant to this year. Maybe they're not small depending on your perspective, but one thing is that we have panels in stock, which with the supply chain disruption, I think the fact that we've got a couple thousand high quality panels in our own warehouses is a real advantage. And then we've also been staffing up. So we actually do have capacity yet for this year. We're booking probably about 14 to 16 weeks out right now. And at some point, I'm sure we will run out of capacity, but we really did staff up and expanded the number of folks that we've brought into the clean energy workforce in anticipation of programs like MadiSUN. Last thing I'd say is I've personally been involved in group buys. There's a yard sign for the first one I did in Wisconsin was in 2013. And Arch has been doing them every year since then, the entire time. And they're a great way to bring community to the solar industry and to bring a lot of people together. And also a great way to support Renew Wisconsin and the great work they do advocating for policy. So thanks for all of you for being here. And if there are any technical questions or anything else, I'll be happy to hop in. I also wanted to mention Samantha actually used to be one of our customers. And so now she works with us and she's part of that staffing up that I talked about. And we're really happy to be bringing people on an almost weekly basis, it seems like. So that's all I got for you, Sam.
Thanks so much, Stanley. We're really happy. I'm especially happy to have you here because you know much more of the technical side than I do. And Stanley's also going to keep me honest tonight. So I'm really glad that he's here. And I also am really glad to announce that a past MadiSUN participant, a homeowner that installed solar through the program, is also going to be here as well. He's going to answer questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A session as well. So if you want the real, juicy tidbits of how the program works and all the weird nuances, Dylan is going to be on later to talk more about that. So let's get started. This is the Solar for Homes program. My name is Sam Denisky. I just want to thank everyone again for joining us tonight. Also want to point out once again, if you do have questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen or in the chat function as well. We'll try to get those answered in real time if we can. If not, we'll certainly answer them. We'll reserve that time at the end, of course, for questions too. Also, one more tidbit, we are recording tonight's webinar. So if you miss something or if you need to drop off for any reason, that will be available on our MadiSUN page and on our YouTube page as well later on. So let's talk a little bit about solar. Again, I'm Sam. I work with Renew Wisconsin. Renew is a renewable energy advocacy organization. We're a statewide program. And the City of Madison has contracted us. We administer the city programs on behalf of the city. Really excited. This is our 6th year now, I believe, of running these programs. They're really great. They're a great way for us to not only add more solar as a community, but also to make the process a lot easier as well. Fun fact aside, that photo in the center, that is not a MadiSUN photo. It's not a photo of a MadiSUN installation, but it is a photo of my parents' solar array in Minnesota. So it's not even in Wisconsin, but I like to keep it in there just because I think it's a great photo. And it really shows that if solar can work in northern Minnesota, it can work pretty much anywhere. So we're going to go over a lot of things tonight. We're going to start, here's our agenda. We're going to start with how solar works. Talk about some of the basics, some of the components, what makes a home or a rooftop good for solar and what doesn't. We're going to talk about reasons why to install solar. There are a lot of reasons, none of which are super important to me as long as you're doing it. That's what I care about. I don't care the specific reasons. I just want to see more solar installed. We're going to get into some economics and incentives as well. How much does it cost? What's your return on investment time? What are some possible rebates and some other things you can get as well? And we're also going to talk about process and next steps as well, just sort of what the purchasing process looks like, timelines, things of that nature as well. So let's start with how does solar work? I think solar, being a somewhat newer phenomena, if you will, a lot of people think that there is a lot of working parts or components or things like that. It's actually not the case. Solar PV, photovoltaic, has actually been around for quite some time. I think the photovoltaic effect was discovered in the early 20th century, so it's been around a while. We know how this technology works. The two main components that go into a solar array, there's really only two of them outside of some wiring and maybe some racking and things like that. those two components are a solar module, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And then the other component, which some of you may not be as familiar with, is an inverter. So the inverter, we'll start with that. That kind of does the behind the scenes work. So an inverter converts direct current or DC electricity into alternating current or AC electricity. AC is typically what all of our lights, our electronics and things like that use. So the panels create DC electricity and that needs to be converted to AC. So that's what the inverter does. There are also smaller inverters. They're called micro inverters, very aptly named. Typically, a regular inverter is about the size of your electric panel box, typically fits somewhere in your home. And, it does all of that, like I said, behind the scenes work, can connect to monitoring equipment as well. So if you're a tech nerd, you can see how much solar your array is producing. You can see how much energy and electricity your home is using. You can see them kind of working side by side. It's very exciting stuff. That photo that I showed earlier of my parents' array, my dad has only owned 2 cell phones in his entire life, and he bought an iPhone specifically so he could monitor his solar production. So if that doesn't show you how fun solar is, I don't know what does. The other component, of course, is the solar module. This, again, is what kind of does the front of the scenes work, if you will. It converts sunlight into electricity. It does this by means of a chemical reaction. So, there's no working components. There's nothing really to break down. It's just a couple of layers of silicon. When the sunlight hits those layers of silicon, it excites the electrons within them. Those electrons then are basically channeled into some wires, and those wires go into your inverter, where they're again converted to AC electricity, and then it goes into your home and into your appliances, into your electronics and things like that. All of the modules that all of our solar installers are using this year have at least a 25-year warranty. Typically, these modules are about the size of a standard door or door frame. So if you can kind of picture that size and how many panels you might need on your roof, that'll give you kind of a vague estimation of how many panels you're going to need, or maybe how much roof space you might need in order to offset that electricity. So let's show all of these components in action. So this is how typically a solar array works. And when we talk about our solar arrays, 99% of the time, we're going to be talking about a grid-tied solar array. So this means you are interconnected with the grid still. There are some very good things and some bad things about that. We'll get into that in just a moment, but this is how it works. So like I said, the sunlight hits your panels on top of the roof. It goes down, that's number one. Then it goes down to number 2, your inverter, where it's again converted from DC electricity to AC. Then that flows into your home and powers all of your lights and electronics. At times of the day, when your home is not producing enough electricity, at night, on cloudy days, things like that, you can still take in electricity off the grid, just like your home does now. You won't notice any difference in the way your TV works or your washing machine works or anything like that. It's just going to look all the same to you. The good thing is, another good thing I should say about having a grid-tied array is excess electricity that your array produces. And this happens actually quite often, especially during the middle of the day, especially on weekends, or actually I should say weekdays, maybe when you're at work, although now more people are working at home, so this may not be the case. When your array produces excess electricity, it will actually flow back out onto the grid. And your meter, you'll have to get a new meter installed with your utility, but that meter will essentially dial backwards, and it will kind of keep track of your electricity. So that's what is called net metering. It's a great policy that we have in place that allows us to kind of bank that excess electricity and use it for later. So a real great reason why it's good to have a grid tied array. A lot of people get very excited when they're about to install solar. They think they're, disconnecting from the grid, things like that. That is a possibility, of course. It's a very expensive proposition. However, you also have to have excess battery backup, things like that. You also have to be very savvy with how you use your electricity. So it's really important that these grid tied arrays exist, because they basically allow you to carry on a normal 21st century life and not have any hiccups like that. And again, because you get those credits for the excess electricity you produce, it almost acts in a way like a virtual battery in some cases, especially for how your checkbook and how your checking account works. I like to call it rollover electricity. This is a really, really bad and dated analogy for those of us who remember rollover minutes on cell phones, which do not exist anymore. That's kind of how it works. You basically get to take the excess electricity that you make during the day and kind of use it during at night. And there's actually a really nice graphic in our net slide here that has that. So this is a schematic of what electricity consumption and solar production looks like during the course of a day. So this area in red, this is a real homeowner's electric use and solar production. The area in red is where this person's home is consuming electricity. So there's a lot of spikes here. So this right here is basically midnight. Then we go to 4 a.m., 8 a.m., just a little before 8 a.m. As you can see, the sun comes up and those solar panels kick in. Little afternoon, we peak out with our electricity. And then as the sun kind of sets in the horizon and then eventually goes away fully and nighttime comes on, that solar production ceases completely. But as you can also see in the red area, the homeowner's electric consumption does not decrease at all, really. It continues, and there's a lot of spikes here. As you can see, these are probably things like refrigerator powering on, maybe this is a dishwasher or something like that. But as you can clearly see, the area in blue, and this is self-consumption, or this is basically where this person's solar array is, or this person's home, excuse me, is consuming the solar energy instantaneously. So that area in blue is relatively small. And you can see the areas in red and also the areas in green are much bigger than that, which is, again, a great reason for net metering. We're basically able to take this area, this excess electricity here that we see in green, and kind of shove it into these areas in red and kind of zero out or cancel out our electric consumption throughout the day. Net metering policies vary by utility. I'm assuming most of us are probably on MG&E. If you're not, if you're on Alliant, you have what is called a monthly net metering true up, which is great. At the end of the month, your utility will see how much electricity you've consumed versus how much electricity you have produced from your solar array, and then they take the net of that meter. It's why we call it net metering. If you're on MG&E, it's even better because you can actually roll over excess electricity from month to month for over the course of a 12-month period. So it's really valuable in an area like Wisconsin, when we often produce a lot more electricity in the summer months than we do in the winter months. If you're in, California or Texas or Florida, that difference isn't quite as stark, but in areas like Wisconsin, it can be pretty stark, which is, again, another great reason why it's great to have not only net metering, but also have a grid connected system. Finally, I should say finally, in the how does solar work part, we're going to talk about what makes a good solar ready home. This is Stanley actually gave me this photo. So these small items right here are your micro inverters. So they just do that same work of that inverter, just at a different stage, different place on your house. But a solar ready home, what you want to look at, the first thing you want to look at is your roof shaded? That's the first thing we look at. Are there trees or other buildings or other things blocking your roof? If your roof is shaded, as you can probably guess, it's not going to receive as much sunlight, and therefore it's not going to produce as much electricity. Second thing we want to look at is your roof, does it have a somewhat newish roof? I always tell people the newer the roof, the better. The best time to put solar panels on is right after the glue dries on those shingles. If your roof is 20, 30 years old, you definitely want to replace it. Kind of in the 10 to 20 year range it gets a little dicey, because roofs obviously age at different rates, but you want as new a roof as possible. And the main reason for that is because, as I said, the panels themselves are warranted for 25 years. We expect these systems to last at least that long, if not 30 years or even longer. And that is basically the same length of time as a typical shingled roof. So that's why we say, you know, the newer the roof, the better. If you can install the panels right after you get a new roof, that's the ideal time to do it. South-facing roof is the best, as you can probably guess, but east and west-facing roofs are okay now too, mainly because of things, again, like net metering policies. It's also due to the fact that panels are much, much more efficient now. They can gather enough sunlight during the course of the day, even if they face east or west, to capture all that sunlight and offset your electricity throughout the day. This was actually, you know, 4 years ago when I started here at Renew, this was actually the first thing we looked at, was what was the orientation of your roof? Did it face south or southeast or southwest? Now it's moved down on the scale of importance. Now the most important thing by far is if your roof is unshaded or not. Again, a south-facing roof is ideal, but other directions are okay. Basically, you just don't want to have it facing north, because as we all know, in the Northern Hemisphere, the sun just does not shine from the north. So you want to have it you know, primarily south, but east or west is okay as well. And then the final thing I want to talk about when we talk about a solar ready home is your home energy efficient? I always tell people that the cheapest kilowatt hour you can buy is the one you never have to produce to begin with. So if your home is filled with, you know, 10, 20, 30-year-old appliances, you might want to think about upgrading those. If you have old incandescent lighting, you want to switch to LEDs, things like that. Insulation does come into play a little bit, mostly from an air conditioning perspective. You know, if your home is more insulated, you're not going to have to use as much AC, or you're going to have to use less AC, excuse me. And that's going to lower your energy consumption as well. The reason why we want you to have a lower energy consumption, that means you can install potentially a much smaller array. That's going to save you money as well. And being energy efficient also allows you to typically, you know, maximize your return on investment time as well. Stanley, I need a quick sip of water, so I just want to give you the opportunity to rebut or to add in anything I may have missed or misspoke on there.
Hi, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think you're doing a great job. I would say I most certainly did not give you that photo, because that's like Spanish tile or something. I actually gave Grace another photo of some microinverters that I think will work a little bit better. But other than that, I think my only other note was just they usually reprogram the meter instead of replacing it, which is good because they probably pass that cost on to us if they were going to physically replace it. So in most cases, they'll just reprogram it. Other than that, I thought you're doing great.
Thanks. I don't know why I thought you gave me that slide. I guess it's been a long.
I probably bugged you
week.
to add one. I probably bugged you to add one of microinverters and then didn't send you one, and you did your best to find one. So I don't mean to give you a hard time about it. Sorry.
No worries. One other thing I do want to point out, Stanley and Arch or whoever, you know, ends up installing your solar array, you may have to have an electric system upgrade as well. Typically, if you have 200 amp service, you don't have to worry. If you have 100 amp service, most of the time you don't have to worry either. You know, a lot of the newer homes, you definitely don't have to worry about any of this. But if you have maybe an older home, you know, on the Isthmus or maybe on the east side of Madison or wherever for that matter, you might need to think about that. But don't worry about that unless that comes up. So we're going to talk now a little bit about why solar in Wisconsin. I think the biggest rebut that I ever hear to solar is, you know, Wisconsin is not Arizona, it's not California. How can we possibly produce enough electricity? And it's true, we don't get as much sun as the Southwest, but we do get enough. And that is just one reason why, but, you know, I'm going to go over a bunch of reasons, and I'm going to start with affordability. Solar has come down quite a lot in price over the last decade or so. This is a graph showing residential solar pricing. So as you can see, it's come down in cost a bit over the last 6 to 8 years or so. If I could go back even further to around 2010, that price would actually be up around like $5, maybe $5.50 per watt. Stanley can probably even provide better numbers than that. So it's come down quite a bit in price over the last decade or so. Unfortunately, it's not coming down anymore, as you can see by the graph, and also just by, everything now is more in price. But solar is definitely affordable now. In the Madison area in Wisconsin, typically, we expect solar to be around $3 per watt. Of course, that can change. It can be a little more than $3. It can also be certainly under $3 per watt as well, depending on the size and the type of panels you choose to purchase with your home. But solar has come down quite a bit, and that's mostly due to a couple of factors. The biggest one, most likely, is economies of scale. We're installing a lot more solar, both as a state, as a country, and as a planet. And as countries like Germany and China and the US and Canada invest more and more money into the manufacturing and production side of these panels, we're able to bring down that sort of cost per unit. It's very similar to, back when cars were first being introduced and they were pretty expensive, and Henry Ford created the assembly line and was able to, turn out cars very quickly and made them very affordable. So economies of scale is a big reason for the reduction in cost. Another big reason, of course, is the efficiency of those panels. Again, about 5 years ago when I started here, panels were generally in the 250 to 300 watt range. Now for residential installations, we're seeing panels almost 400 watts, maybe even above 400 watts in some cases. In utility scale solar installations, we're seeing panels over 550 watts each. So they're really growing. They're becoming much more efficient. The dimensions of the panels have remained the same, but the footprint, but the efficiency has gone up too. So we need less panels, or we need less panels for the same amount of electricity production, basically. Another reason why solar is a good investment in Wisconsin is it's very reliable. A lot of people assume that these solar panels are just a kind of a thin, flimsy piece of glass. It couldn't be further from the truth. I really like moving images. I really like this particular GIF. This is actually as you can see, it's a gun, if you will, shooting ice cubes at a solar panel. As you can see, they're just kind of vaporizing on impact. So the panels can withstand pretty large hail. They can withstand some very strong wind gusts as well. Most of the panels now, I think pretty much every residential system has the panels flush mounted to the roof so they can withstand strong winds. The other sort of meteorological impact that I think a lot of folks are worried about, especially in Wisconsin, is snow and snow cover. If we get a snowfall, your panels are not going to produce electricity. There's really no way around that, no way to sugarcoat it. The good news is, panels, as you can see, the panel is kind of a darker color. They're always a little bit warmer, just, because they have electricity flowing through them most of the time, unless it's, nighttime or whatever. And the panels, like I said, are mounted at an angle. So typically that snow is going to melt and it is going to slide off, but it may take a while. Sometimes it might take a day, sometimes it may take several days. I've heard a few cases in northern Wisconsin saying they take weeks or even months. I think that is more of the exception rather than the norm. But the important thing is to remember is that, even with snowfall, the panels are going to shed that snow on their own. You don't need to get up on your roof and get a snow brush like your car. You don't need to scrape the panels. Please do not scrape the panels. You may void the warranty. And also, even with snow cover, most of our solar contractors, I know Stanley does this, for instance, they actually build in a little bit of decreased production in their forecasting or their modeling during the winter months, because we all know that Wisconsin gets snow, and we all know that when snow falls on those panels, they're not going to work as well. Another great reason, sorry, my mouse is not working here, why it's great to install solar is we can really boost our local economy this way. Solar creates lots of jobs, and these jobs cannot be outsourced. We need boots on the ground putting these panels on our roofs. And this is by installing solar on your home, it's a great way to do it. I know Stanley and all of our other installers are constantly looking for folks. There's always more work to do. And by, like I said, installing solar on your home, you are able to kind of help out and boost our local economy. Another great reason is, if you need another one, is solar increases the value of your home. So this was a study out of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado. And it showed that solar homes sold for faster and for more money than other homes across similar subdivisions. So what that means is, if you and your neighbor go to sell your home at the same time, and your home has solar, your neighbor's does not, your home is likely going to sell for more money and more quickly than your neighbors. And this sort of made sense, right? If you're a prospective home buyer and you're looking for houses and you want, something about this size, about this age, and this price range, and you see a home that has, let's say, an electric bill of $200 per month, and you see another home that has an electric bill of maybe $40 per month, obviously you're going to choose the one with the lower utility bill, because that is going to save you money over the long term. So solar is a great way. What I'm saying is, solar is a great way to add value to your home very easily. So just to sum up, here's just some of the many reasons why it's great to own your own solar array, produce your own electricity. You can save money on your electricity bills. We've already talked about that. Boost your local economy as well. Again, with utility prices, we've seen pretty much all of the utilities in Wisconsin, their rates rose over the last year or two. And, we expect those rates to continue to rise. If you install solar, you're also going to be, you're going to be hedging against those rising utility prices. You're not going to be as susceptible to those market forces or to, shortages in fuel supply and things like that. So it's really a great, almost insurance policy, if you will, for your energy consumption. Again, it can add value to your home, and very important, at least to me, but not necessarily to everyone, is switching to a clean, renewable source of electricity as well. So many, many reasons to install solar. Again, the one you choose is up to you. It doesn't really matter to us which one you choose, as long as you're going solar. It doesn't matter to us. So I want to get now to the important part that probably most people are interested in: the economics and the incentives for solar. How much does this stuff cost, right? I talked about how it's affordable, and it certainly has come down in price, but solar is still pretty expensive. And part of the benefits of joining a group buy is we are able to reduce that cost a little bit. Typically, it amounts to around a 5% discount, but again, that can vary based on your home, the size of the array you install, and some other things like that. So we not only hopefully bring down the price a little bit, but the main thing that we do, and this is actually more important, is we simplify the process. We try to make it super, super easy for all of the homeowners in our community to install solar. We select experienced, reputable contractors like Stanley and like Samantha to do these installations. They understand the local permitting, they understand the engineering and how these systems get built. We also, like I said, we bring down the price. Mainly that is by getting a bunch of homeowners together and collectively kind of going out and searching for these contractors through economies of scale and through bulk purchasing and things like that. That's how we're able to make the price a little bit more affordable for everyone. And then we also provide consulting and customer support throughout the way for all the folks that sign up as well. I think it's a really great program, of course, not just because I run it, but just because it does make just things really easy for homeowners. A lot of people have typically not purchased a solar array before. And for a lot of things, if you're looking, say, for someone to do siding or to do gardening work or things like that, you can talk to your neighbor, you can talk to a friend, and you can get referrals from them, who did a good job on your siding of your home. That is not as much of an option for solar, just because not as many folks have done it. So again, we try to make the process real easy, and we try to select the best folks to do these jobs throughout the way. And this is a really popular way of getting more solar installed. So this is a list of all of the different group buys from around the state. This is actually from last year. So as you can see, several hundred homes went solar through these group buys. Over a megawatt, almost 2 megawatts of solar were installed last year. So it's a really popular way to grow the renewable energy industry, and you can see kind of the results here. So let's talk a little bit about the incentives. The main incentive that I want to talk about is from the Focus on Energy program. If you are unfamiliar with this program, please, as soon as this presentation is done, go out and Google it, find out about all the great programs and rewards and incentives that they offer. They do offer a residential solar incentive. You can get up to a $500 rebate if you qualify. There are some qualifications. Your home has to be within 130 degrees of due south, which sounds crazy. Basically, what that means is, I kind of talked about it before, if your home faces east, south, or west, your home should be able to qualify. However, you do have to meet some shading requirements as well. Stanley's probably going to correct me on this, but I think it is 15% or less shading. So if your home is 15% or less shaded, and if it faces, again, east, south, or west, you should be able to qualify for that rebate. There's also a angle at which the panels have to sit that you have to qualify for as well. So it's a $500 flat fee. Unless you live in what is considered a rural area, then you can receive up to a $1,000 rebate. So I think we can put some of those rural zip codes in the chat. Grace, if you can find those, that would be great. Next thing I want to talk about, the next incentive, I should say, this is kind of the big one. This is the solar investment tax credit. And I think a lot of people are familiar with this tax credit now at this point, mostly because it is scheduled to reduce after this year. We saw the first big reduction of the tax credit back in 2020, where the solar tax credit went from 30% in 2019 down to 26%. It was slated to go down last year, but thankfully those credits got extended. So now the schedule is they will be at 26% this year, and then they get reduced to 22% in 2023. And then for the residential installations, they go away completely in 2024. They do stay at 10% for commercial installations in 2024 and beyond, but they do go away for residential. Now, that being said, Congress certainly can act on this. Those tax credits can be extended, but it is certainly a bit of a roll of the dice, if you will. We don't know for sure that that's going to happen. We have no way of knowing that that might happen. I am hopeful and optimistic that it will, but we have to work with what we know. And right now, what we know is that it will be reduced starting next year. So now that we know what incentives are out there, we can do sort of a solar cost exercise. So in Wisconsin, in the Madison area especially, an average system is about 5 kilowatts. I should point out right away that every system, however, is going to be sort of custom built or custom tailored to the exact size that your home needs or the exact amount of electricity you need. At about $3 per kilowatt, like I talked about before, or excuse me, $3 per watt, that ends up being about $15,000. If we factor in a Focus on Energy rebate, that takes $500 off. The tax credit takes us down to that. And the out-of-pocket cost puts us at a little over $10,000, or I should say a little under maybe $11,000. So again, every project, every system is going to be a different amount, but this should hopefully give you a vague idea of how much solar can cost. Now, again, this is just an approximation. Solar really can run anywhere from $10,000 to $40,000. Again, this is just using average size systems and average costs. So I just want to, I'm adding in the big caveat here of this is just one example. You're going to need to find out what size system you need and what the costs are related to that. So speaking of costs, at this point, I want to bring back Mike from Green Penny. You know, like I said, solar has come down a lot in price, but it still is very expensive. But there are ways, you know, if you don't have $11,000 or $15,000 or $30,000 sitting around, in your bank account, that's okay. There are still other ways to go solar, and Mike's going to talk about that right now. So Mike, go ahead, give me a little break here and to talk about Green Penny.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, so I'm Mike Ludeking. I'm with Green Penny. We're a virtual and carbon neutral community bank out of Northeast Iowa, out of Decorah, Iowa. We're about 140 miles or so straight west of Wisconsin, or I mean of Madison, excuse me. And so what we do is we finance renewable energy projects, mainly solar projects. And so like Sam said, these projects typically cost $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. And a lot of people, may not be able to just write a check for, $15,000 to $25,000. And so one of our goals with Green Penny is to finance these projects and really just swap out what your old utility payment was, your average utility bill, for a loan payment. And so if you're paying, let's say, an average of $150 a month with your utility bill, what our goal is to just have a $150 loan payment. And then after you pay your loan off, after say 10 years or so, 10 or 15 years, you have at least 10 to 15 more years of energy production from those panels. And that's just going to be free energy that you have for those 10 to 15 years. Of the life of those panels. So I'll get into a little bit of how it works here. And so we've got this with this nice slide up still on the screen. So if it's a $15,000 system, what we're going to do with Green Penny is we're going to take we're going to break the system into two loans. And so on a $15,000 system, the first loan is going to be a 26% incentive loan. So we're going to take one loan and it's going to be $3,770. And we're going to amortize that. It's just going to be a 15-month single pay loan. So you don't have to make any payments on that loan. When you get your federal tax credit back, say in 12 to 15 months, in the spring of next year, you will just take that and wipe that loan off and pay it off with that federal tax credit money. And then the other side of the loan would be the $10,730. And we're going to amortize that over up to 20 years. But what our goal is like I previously mentioned, our goal is to really swap out your utility bill, your average utility bill, for a loan payment. And so maybe that's a 10-year amortization, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 20, depending on what market you're in. Or the cost of your installation, but that's really what our goal is with the program. And so we've financed probably close to 500 of these projects so far in the last we've really been running Green Penny for 2 years, but our parent Corp Decor Bank's been financing solar for over 15 years. So we've probably financed 350 of these in the last 2 years, and probably 100 prior to that. And so that's how we typically structure these.
Great, thanks, Mike. Mike's going to stick around at the end of for the Q&A session as well. So if you have more questions, feel free to save them or put them in the chat.
Sam, can I just add one thing?
Please.
To follow up on that. I would just say, like, I've been around solar a while and I've worked with other lenders, and I think Green Penny does a really, really good job. Whichever installer you go with is going to be able to offer you Green Penny. So I would just really encourage you to check them out.
Yes, and sorry.
No, I was just thanking Stanley for the kind words.
Absolutely. And, the Green Penny folks are really great to work with. That being said, you do not have to work with Green Penny. You can work with another lender. Like I said, you can also just simply pay out of cash or savings. Another popular method of paying for these systems is also doing something like a home refinance loan as well. All of that information is available on our MadiSUN page. Grace, if you can put the financing page on there as well in the chat, that would be super awesome as well. So we're going to move on. Now that we know sort of the cost, especially the out-of-pocket cost of our system, we can calculate a solar energy value. So if we take, again, this is still using that same very hypothetical 5 kilowatt array. A 5 kilowatt array typically is going to produce, in Wisconsin, we generally get about 1,300 hours of sunlight per year. So based on that, we can calculate the savings. So if you are in a municipal utility like Sun Prairie Municipal or say Wanakee, your electric rate is around 11 cents per kilowatt hour, you're going to typically save about $700 per year, maybe a little bit more. If you are on Alliant and you're paying about 13 cents per kilowatt hour, you're going to save about $800 per year. And if you're, again, MG&E, I think most of us are probably on MG&E, but I don't want to say for sure. Grace, if you could put the poll up, actually, that would be great, because I want to know where folks are getting their utility service from. If you're on MG&E and you're paying 14 cents per kilowatt hour, you're going to get about you're going to see on average about $900 per year in savings. Again, this is completely based on averages. It's based on a 5 kilowatt array. It's based on an average sunny year. So what you are going to save every year is going to vary certainly a lot. It can certainly be less than that, especially if we have a cloudy year or even a cloudy few weeks like we've had here, other than today. But it, in theory, can also be more than that, especially if utility rates continue to rise. So I guess I was shown I am wrong. So most votes here are from Alliant. So, but this is a good way to show just very easily what our annual savings approximately can be. So with that, we can figure out on our return on investment time relatively easily. If we know, our system is going to cost us, let's say, about $11,000 out of pocket, and our average savings is about $900 per year. That's going to relate to about a 10-year payback period. This can certainly be more. I've heard that it is more. I've heard also that it is less, depending on, again, who has installed their system, when they installed it, what kind of year we've been having, things like that. I've heard some residential folks paying them off as quickly as 7 years. I think that's much more infrequent, but 10 is sort of like the good baseline that we like to go with. And with that said, again, if the panels are going to last us 25 to 30 years or more, that can amount to almost $20,000 in overall savings. So if you're going to be in your home for a while, if you're going to be, utilizing your electricity, and if you're thinking long term, there can be some big cost savings involved in solar. So I've already gone a little bit over, but I do want to talk about a few extra things that people are talking about now. A lot of folks are switching to electric vehicles. Solar can certainly help save you money, potentially even more money that way, if you are getting all of your electricity from the sun and you're using that to charge your electric vehicle. That can potentially save you not only money in electricity bills, but also in gas bills as well, or in gas payments, I should say. Another component, I should say, another extra that has been getting a lot of traction lately is battery backup. I'm not a Tesla fanboy, but I do notice that both of these items have both these pictures, I should say, have Tesla products in them. Batteries are becoming more and more popular as well. There's Wisconsin companies like Generac and other companies too that you could potentially choose as a battery backup. Both of these components, as you can probably guess, will add quite a bit to your installation costs, especially on the battery side. Even relatively small battery packs now can do as much as double the cost of your system. But more folks are installing them, and whether that be just for peace of mind, you'll have electricity during a power outage, or if you just, you're that person that always buys the newest iPhone, maybe you just like the newest technology and the newest stuff. Those are all very valid reasons to want to purchase these other systems. So if you're interested in that, think about the cost, but also talk to your installer as well. So last thing I want to talk about is steps to installing. The first thing, if you haven't done it already, is to sign our I'm interested form. Grace is going to put that in the chat as well. I'm assuming most of you have done it, but if you haven't, please do so. After that, you'll get a phone call from us here at MadiSUN. We'll discuss a lot of the things we've discussed tonight, but in more detail and more specifically to your home. So we'll talk about your energy use. We'll look at your roof. We'll give you some ballparks on, the system size you need, the number of panels, things like that. If everything sounds good, what we do from there is we forward you on to our contractors. We have 2 contractors that we're working with. Stanley and Arch Electric is one. And our other contractor is Full Spectrum Solar. We've chosen 2 contractors because we want to give homeowners a choice in this process. You can kind of evaluate which company, which products are right for you and make a decision. Once you get a proposal from them, that will lay out the exact size and the type of array that you'll need. It will lay out costs and incentives and things like that. If everything looks good from there, your solar contractor will issue you a contract. And from that point on, then your solar array gets installed. This whole process can take several weeks, maybe several months at this point. I'm sure Stanley's going to give us some insider info on that. The interesting thing about all this is, let's say this entire process will take 2 to 3 months. The construction of the solar array actually goes really, really quickly. It can be at most a day or 2. And that is not to say anything about the work that our contractors do. It's because they are so good. They can do these systems very well, very quickly and very easily. So the ironic part is it takes a long time to get the system installed, but the shortest amount of time is actually the construction process. So something to think about there. But here are the basic steps. Stanley, if you have any thing to add there, please do so, especially if you want to talk about timelines and things like that.
Yeah, I'd say that the process for us is basically we'll have someone, likely my colleague Samantha, stop out and take a bunch of photos, get a bunch of info. And then once you have a proposal, if you decide to move forward, it's generally right now, like I was saying, about 14 to 16 weeks before we'll be able to get back on site and install the system. And in that time, we'll be working on all of the utility and permitting and other paperwork and things like that. There's been a lot of good questions coming in, Sam, and I apologize. I hope I wasn't distracting the audience by answering them live. I just can't help myself a little bit. Did you have other content, or were we at the Q&A? It looks like we're at the Q&A.
We are at the Q&A, and in fact, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and invite our panelists back on to chat and to take questions. Grace, you can feel free to fire away, but before you do that, I do want to welcome our homeowner, Dylan. Dylan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your perspective here. I know we've often received questions from homeowners saying, can I talk to someone who's already gone through it? I think having you here as sort of a peer-to-peer mentoring is really great. So I just want to welcome you and thank you again for being here.
Glad to be here.
So, Grace, do you have a question for us that Stanley hasn't already jumped ahead and answered?
Yeah, I'll go in order. So this one is from Erin. She has a couple questions. What if a roof needs maintenance but not replacing? What kind of happens there?
Yeah, I mean oh, are you there?
Go ahead, Stanley.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually trying to follow up with Aaron as to what they meant by maintenance on a roof. I mean, I was curious about that. Like if there's a leak under a panel. Okay, if there's a leak under a solar panel, I mean, most solar contractors will have like a 5-year workmanship warranty, and any good contractor is gonna come take care of that. And it's pretty darn rare, but I can't say it's never happened over the course of thousands of installs. But we use special flashings and things to prevent that. And but if it does happen, that'd be a situation where you're looking at a workmanship warranty. Unfortunately, if there's a leak that's not caused by the solar under the panels, then you'd be paying a labor rate to just have somebody come out and pull the panels off for the roofer to come in and do their repairs.
All
Great.
right.
What's
And
the next
then,
question, Grace?
yeah, another question, also from Aaron. We'd like to know how long a battery backup would last, assuming that, power outages are rare, how long those batteries would provide them with energy.
Well, it
So
depends on oh, go ahead, Stanley.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm keep jumping in. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it depends on the size battery you get and potentially how many battery packs you get. But Stanley, you can add a lot more details to that than I can.
I think they might have also been asking about the longevity of the battery, and that'll depend on how many times you cycle the battery and what size battery. And then in terms of the duration, it's also a lot of it is how you use your energy and power during that grid outage. You're going to want to be planning and thinking about how you use your energy if the grid is down. I just want to add one thing that was brought up in the chat that was really important and related is like, if you don't have a battery or other additional equipment, your system, your solar PV array is not going to provide power during the grid outage. There is other equipment you can install, and the IQ8 microinverters are an option, but it's just something that's really counterintuitive to people. And I always mention it in my presentations. I just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you, Stanley. I usually mention that too, and it somehow slipped my mind tonight. So thank you for catching me. Grace, what's our next question?
Yeah, there seems to be a couple questions about roofs. So in general, talking about age of roof, replacement, if it's possible to get solar and then replace. So if we could just kind of do an overview of roof and roofing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say if your roof has 10 or 15 or something like that years left, it might not be a horrible idea to put your panels up, take advantage of the tax credit, and then in 10 or 15 years, pay the installer who installed them. Or honestly, if you didn't have a good experience, you could probably hire another installer to do it. But they'll come out, and usually it's about, I'd say, 1 to 2 days worth of labor for 2 people to pull those panels off, set them aside, let the roofer come in and do the roof, and then go from there. It looks like somebody else was asking about a metal roof, so I'm just going to bundle that in with this question. Metal roofs can be a very good option for solar, specifically a standing seam metal roof is going to be your best bet. So if you're working with a roofer and you just ask them, what's the most expensive metal roof you have? It's probably a standing seam metal roof. And that is your best option, because then you can have a clip that actually goes on to that metal roof and attaches to those seams themselves, and you reduce or eliminate the need for penetrations. So yes, metal roofs, you pay a lot more for them, obviously, when you buy them, but either type of metal roof can work, whether it's just a corrugated metal roof or the standing seam. Were there any other roof questions that I missed, Grace?
Not that I know of. Maybe you could speak to the cost of having to, I guess, replace the roof while the panels are on.
Yeah. Sorry, I said 1 to 2 days labor, but I didn't give you kind of a ballpark figure. Obviously, we don't know what labor rates are going to be in 15 years, right? But it's a few $1,000s, right? It's 1,000, it's 2,000. If you've got a small system, maybe it's $1,000. If you've got a really large system with a steep pitch and a difficult install, those same difficulties are going to happen when we pull the panels off. So it's not something, it's not going to double the cost of your roof, but it's going to add a nice expense that you should be prepared for if you choose to install a roof that will need replacement during the life of the solar.
Okay, awesome. I think that covered the roof portion, unless anyone has some lingering questions there. But I don't know, Stanley, if you can speak on heat pumps and maybe even EVs too, kind of an estimate of how much electric usage would go up if you add these appliances.
That's fantastic. Whoever asked that question gets a gold star for sure, because we used to always size our systems based on the idea that if you have an appliance that's on natural gas, you're never going to change that because natural gas is dirt cheap, right? I mean, even still today, the cost of heating water, for instance, with natural gas is really low. The cost of heating a house with it is still relatively low. Now that solar's come on board, many people are like, well, I don't really want to support all the other things, all the externalities associated with that. So then they opt for something like a heat pump. Heat pump is gonna, like, just bottom line, it's gonna take the heat out of the air, or in some cases the ground, and it's gonna convert that heat into a form that you can utilize in your home. You're gonna see significant increases from either geothermal, which is a ground source, it's in the ground, or an air source heat pump. Both of those will be an increase if you're replacing especially your heat source. Now, they are more efficient than at cooling, they're more efficient than a traditional air conditioning unit. So if you're primarily using it in that sense, it's going to save you electricity. But if you are using it to provide at least some heat and do your cooling, it's likely you'd see an increase. Estimating exactly what that will be is going to be HVAC territory, and you're going to want to ask the person quoting you your unit. EVs are a little easier. You can take the miles per kilowatt hour of, like, we have a Chevy Bolt. It's just like it's like an egg car that has like a 230-mile range. And that car has a 60 kilowatt hour battery, right? And I can get roughly 3 miles on average throughout the year per kilowatt hour. So I guess the bottom line is about 3,000 kilowatt hours per year will get you about 10,000 miles with that vehicle. And that's really rough. And that assumes you're charging at home 100% of the time, which a lot of people do. So there's a lot that goes into that. And we have a spreadsheet that our energy consultants can use. If you've got a vehicle in mind that's a different one and you want us to come up with that number for you, we can do that. Hope that helps.
I'll just add on to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we put a 12-panel system on our roof, sized for the current electric consumption. This was a few years ago. At the time, the current electric consumption we had in our home was about 90% of our annual assumed electric use, because we had just moved in. It was my understanding, I think, I ended up working with Brent and Full Spectrum. They were great to work with, and Stanley, I'm sure you guys would be great to work with too. So,
Totally.
But yeah, Brent was fantastic and kind of walking me through this. And I believe it was MG&E, so I'm in Madison. MG&E wouldn't necessarily want to agree to me oversizing a system if I didn't have the electric use for it, because then I would be a producer. And it's not financial. It didn't make financial sense for me in that situation either, because I'd be selling electricity back at wholesale rates and not the retail rates. So there's not an incentive for you to oversize too much. We are considering adding EVs, and we are doing some heat pumps and other electrification of our home. So what I opted to do was I went with the 12-panel system, but I oversized my inverter so that when I did add these loads, I would then know, well, what is the actual use, right? What is my EV drawing, or what is my heat pump drawing? And then I can add panels on after the fact. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, but that's kind of how I decided to go through with that. So
yeah, if you have a string inverter, you can oversize that string inverter, like Dylan said. That's definitely, if you have I imagine you've got a solar edge inverter.
Yep.
That's probably what you got. Yep, that's a great option. Another option, if you go with microinverters, which I think Full Spectrum and I think we're both offering the same microinverters, so it's not even a differentiator at this point. But microinverters do, I would say, make it even easier for you to add more panels later. Certainly, if you're really confident you're getting an EV in 3 months or 6 months, you might decide to get the economies of scale and install extra panels. But ultimately, most of the systems built today, if you tell the person you want a little extra room or you want to plan for the future, they're going to be able to do that.
Great. So I noticed we're after 8, and I want to be respectful of my panelists' time because you guys have been so great. These are why I have all these other folks on here, because I forget about these things during the course of the presentation. So I just want to see if you all mind sticking around a little bit longer, because I do see we have some other questions. Okay. So Grace, why don't you fire away, because these are some really great questions that are coming in.
Yeah, I think I have some questions that would be directed more towards your area of expertise, Sam. One being, what's the cost benefit for MadiSUN versus going an individual route?
Sure. So like I said, typically it amounts to about a 5% discount. Stanley might actually be able to answer this even better than I, because he knows what they offer an outside person versus a person that comes through the program. But yet typically it amounts to about a 5% discount. But Stanley, please feel free to add on to that.
Yeah, there's a NRS, and I don't know if Full Spectrum does this, but in our estimate on page 2, it'll just show you what the discount is. If you've got a smaller system, it might be $500. If you've got a larger system, it scales with your system size. So some people are seeing a $1,200 savings, other people $2,000 for a really large system with a battery or something. So
Yep.
it's we chose to be pretty aggressive because we really want to get as many people with solar this year as possible. So yeah.
I really
so
appreciate the added benefit too of MadiSUN hooked me up. At the time, it was Summit Credit Union that was doing the financing. So I didn't have to go find a bank. And I knew Summit, they were in town. I was already banking with them. So that was a big benefit too. And obviously Mike and Green Penny, I've heard great things about them. I haven't banked with them yet, but probably will in the future. So.
Yep, and we, like I said, there are other options on our financing page, so please go and take a look at that. Again, it's another way of making the process as easy as possible. Grace, what's the next question?
Yeah, does MadiSUN provide assistance for HOA for approval of installation? HOA is a homeowners association.
You don't need MadiSUN to get involved. They've got no teeth. They can't stop you from doing solar, and any contractor that's used to working in Wisconsin will know that. So there's things we do to make them happy. Like we use all black panels. We try to make it look nice, but we do that anyway. Generally, they just want the contractor to provide additional information, photos, spec sheets, 3D renderings, things of that nature. And I don't want to speak for Full Spectrum, but I know Arch is more than happy to just take care of that so that you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, I know Full Spectrum has also worked with quite a few HOAs around the community. So I do think this was a problem, say 2 or 3 years or 3 or 4 years ago. I don't think it's as much of a problem now because, as Stanley pointed out, they work with HOAs. There are ways to mitigate the issues that they have had in the past. And I don't think it's something you have to worry about. But if you do, please reach out to myself or Stanley if there are more specific questions surrounding your homeowners association.
Okay. And then a question from Mark H is, can you explain more about Alliant Energy's billing and how that works with the solar array?
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at that and Stanley can add on because I'm sure he's done many installations in Alliant territory. What happens is, your solar array is going to, like I said, produce electricity. If it produces excess, it will go onto Alliant's grid. At night and cloudy days, when you have to pull energy from Alliant, your meter will again go forward. At the end of the month, Alliant, when they send out your bill, they do your tally and they figure out how much you owe. So your utility bill is not going to go away. I know there are some more nefarious solar installers out there that we don't want to work with that are saying things like your utility bill will just vanish into thin air. That is not the case. There are still things like fixed charges. There are still definitely months where you will have to consume more electricity than you produce. So you will still have an electric bill. But yeah, with Alliant at the end of the month, they look at your consumption versus your production, and then they base your bill off that in conjunction with your fixed costs. And Stanley, again, please feel free to add on there where I swung and missed.
No, I think you did a good start. I would say the big thing to keep in mind with Alliant is that they're going to determine your buyback rate on a monthly basis. So you're just, for any excess exports during a month, you're going to get the lower credit value in Alliant territory. In MG&E, it's annual until you become a net producer, as Dylan very well pointed out very well. But in Alliant, it's net monthly. So if, for example, if my house, if we produced 1,000 kilowatt hours and we exported to the grid because we weren't using that power, 1,000 kilowatt hours, and we only imported during that month 900, that's 100 kilowatt hour difference. Just that excess portion in Alliant territory in Wisconsin is going to be credited it's around 3.8 cents right now. The rest of your energy is still offsetting your full retail cost of electricity. And so what that gets to is in Alliant territory, if you're thinking a few years down the road, you might go forward with an EV. You can kind of push the envelope a little bit, and we're going to be able to show you that in the modeling and in the cost analysis that, oh, you're going to get wholesale for now for this excess. And MG&E, if you become a net exporter, it's a totally different proposition. And that's why Full Spectrum, very rightfully so, cautioned Dylan against oversizing. So it's a delicate balance, and you really want to spend some time going back and forth with your installer and thinking about your long-term needs, because Alliance crediting will definitely treat you differently than MG&E's, but both of them have advantages at the same time. So I hope that
I
wasn't
think
too
we
murky.
might have a follow-up question with that. Mark J wants to know why would we want to underproduce if we're always going to have a monthly electric bill?
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
what
a
was
good
the
question. It's why would you want to underproduce if will always have an electric bill? And I think Stanley kind of hit on this is, if you're trying to recoup your costs at your 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour rate, it's going to take a long time, right? That's why we typically have you underproduce, because that retail rate that you're saving is going to be much more economically favorable than if you buy a larger array than what you need and you're trying to recoup your costs that way. There's probably a better way to explain it, Stanley. If you want to go for it, please go ahead.
I think you did good. I mean, basically, know what your next 2 years of energy consumption are going to look like if you're going to consider oversizing your array. Because if you can suffer for a year or two, you might get enough benefit in installing the larger system. But if you're not going to be adding an EV or geothermal or electric hot water heaters, like really size for 90%, 95% if you want to push the envelope, then the other thing you can do, anybody that's concerned about that, pay the extra couple $100 and get consumption monitoring, perhaps, because then you can now have a record of what your home's consuming versus what it's producing. So that's a helpful tool if you are going to push the envelope, just also to get consumption monitoring as part of your system. So you can see what the home is using and what it's producing. All systems are going to show you by default what your system is producing. It's just that extra piece would be helpful.
So Grace, I think we have about time for maybe one or two more questions. I do want to give Dylan one more chance. I know he mentioned a little bit about his array, but Dylan, do you want to just say like what size you got? You don't have to talk about cost or anything like that, but just like what size you got and any kind of, interesting things that happened during the process that you might want to make folks aware of that maybe they hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, sure. So we ended up with a 4.32 kW system. So that was 12 panels on the roof. We ended up going with the Solar Edge inverter. And as I mentioned, we oversized that so that I can add, I think I can get 12 more panels on, so I can roughly double our production, which is great. Going through the process was really simple. Like I said, I think I reached Sam first years ago when I decided to move forward. He connected me, like I said, with Full Spectrum. Brent there was just great to work with and kind of walk me through that process. It was all really easy. They did end up waiting, I think, a half a year. They had some staffing stuff going on. So just, and there's staffing and there's supply and there's things going on in the world, right? And so Sam, you had mentioned this, the actual install was like a day or two. There's other things going on that I wasn't necessarily aware of at the time. And so, like I said, it can be just getting guys on site, getting materials, getting like the interconnection agreement. And there was another form, I can't remember what it was, but there was some extra stuff involved there. But Full Spectrum was great in helping walk me through all of that. So yeah, once we got it all hooked up, it's been fantastic. I've been super happy offsetting the vast majority of my energy use annually, and it feels good. So I'm very happy. As I said, my loan is through Summit. I did take a peek at Green Penny's loans. They are a better rate. So I wish Green Penny would have been around back in 2019. But that was great too. That, as I said, that financing piece was just right there. We had just moved into our home. I didn't have, I think it was like 13 grand, 15 grand, something like that. I can't remember the exact cost, but didn't have that laying around, right? So that financing piece is a really big part of what I thought was so great about MadiSUN. So that's it. Yeah, I mean, it's been a great experience. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So.
Great. Yeah, I know we have a lot more questions. I'm sorry we can't get to them all. Hopefully the panelists can add in and type in some of those questions. But Grace, why don't we do one more question?
Yeah, I think Mark J has a question, and maybe we can kind of expand on it as well. They'd like to know that if adding a 50-gallon electric water heater instead of a natural gas heater, kind of how many panels that would add on, and maybe if we can talk about price there, and maybe we can talk about other additions, other common additions.
So yeah, I'll just start and say, whether it be, a 50-gallon water heater or a Tesla Model S, you just have to see how much electricity that item is going to use. And Stanley and our other contractors have great ways of figuring that out. For a car, it might be, as many as 6 or 7 or 8 panels. If you're changing a water heater, or maybe you're changing, some people have gas dryers as well, and they switch to electric. You just need to find out what that is. So if the more information you have on like the make and model of that appliance or whatever it is you're plugging in, the better. And if you can provide that to Stanley or to your contractor, it'll help you get a more accurately sized system, which is just going to save you money in the long run, and it's going to be more cost effective for you. Anything else to add there from our other panelists?
I posted a link there for gas and natural gas hot water heaters. So you can play around with that calculator if you're so inclined to get into the weeds. Otherwise, I'm sure your contractor will be able to give you a general sense.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to put, Grace, if you can put my email address and your email address into the chat, that would be great. If we can put Stanley's, and Mike, if you wouldn't mind putting yours in as well, that would be super helpful. I really appreciate everyone being on tonight. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. It's so fun to have so much great participation. So really thank everyone for joining us tonight. And again, please feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions, because we would definitely like to get them answered. If we haven't spoken to you on the phone already, we can definitely answer those questions there as well. So I just want to say thanks again and have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Grace.
Thanks, guys.
Cooler.